Hi, I'm Cailey, a librarian here at Mentor Public Library.
And I'm Meg, also a librarian, and welcome to this week's edition of All Booked Up with Cailey and Meg, where each time we give you a different book recommendation on a specific theme. Today, we're going to be looking at books to movies. So earlier, we've done books that have been turned into young adult movies, so teen books. This time, we're going to be looking at a little broader of a range. So anything that's come out either this year or in years past, and we're going to give you a look at them.
Yes, and we're not always the biggest fans of the movies that are made from our favorite books. Yes. But I think the ones we've picked here today that we've seen at least are ones that we approve of. I think that sometimes it can be done right. They have to pay good respect to the book. And all of the books that we're going to talk about today are available for you in the library as well as online with your library card through Libby and Hoopla. Okay. What's your first one?
So my first one is one that's going to be turned into a movie this year. It's Killers of the Flower Moon, the Osage Murders and the Birth of the FBI by David Grann. So this one, I know Cailey, we both work at the library. This is one that's been very popular as a book the past couple years. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be coming out later, like November of this year on Apple TV. And it's going to be directed by Martin Scorsese and starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Robert De Niro, and Jesse Plemons. So it's an all-star cast. I'm really looking forward to it, but we're going to be talking about the book today. And read that first if you can. So this book investigates a series of murders among wealthy Osage people that took place in Osage County, Oklahoma in the early 1920s. And the context for this was that there was big oil deposits found underneath this land that were deemed to be very lucrative. And the Osage people were granted the rights to getting the money that came, like some of the profits from all this oil that was found. And this rubbed some of the administrators of that land the wrong way, that these Osage people were getting the profits. So needless to say, there was a horrifying plot hatched, and the book goes into detail about investigating the murders of these people and why they happened. And it's also interesting because this is early in the FBI's history. Like I said, this is like early 1920s is when the murders happened. Late 20s is when the investigation happened. J. Edgar Hoover was only 29 when this happened, when this investigation happened. So it's interesting on a lot of fronts. I'm curious about how the adaptation is going to go, and check this one out if you're interested in true crime and history.
Absolutely. And that was a fascinating book. I know I discussed it in both of my book groups within the last few years. Yeah. And what's shocking about it is sort of how recent it really is in our history and just how many of those murders remain unsolved today. And I'm curious how sensationalized that movie is going to be and if it does respect to the book. So you've got plenty of time to read the book before that movie comes out, everyone.
Yes.
The first I'm going to mention is Room by Emma Donoghue.
Okay.
And this one's a little bit older. I think the book was out in 2010 or 11, and the movie was out in 2015. And this is just a great example of both the book and the movie being just brilliant in a lot of ways. Yeah. The movie was an Oscar darling with a number of nominations, and Brie Larson won for Best Actress. But on to the book. If you're unfamiliar with it, Room is told from Jack's perspective. Jack is 5, and his whole world is room. Room is where Ma is, where TV is, where he eats, where he sleeps, bathes, plays, and exercises. It's where Ma closes him into the wardrobe at night when old Nick visits. This 11 by 11 foot space is just all he's ever known. For his mother, this room is where she has been kept for the past 7 years, held captive by the man they call Old Nick. And she has an escape plan in mind, and Jack is really key to this escape plan. she's been sort of training him to be ready for when the time comes, but has sort of caged it in play and exercises and things, because he really doesn't understand things outside of room, because to him, everything outside of room that we would know to be true, that his mother knows to be true, is TV, like grass, trees, animals. Those things are all TV to him. He doesn't believe in those because he's only 5 and his whole life has been spent in this small room. And when they do hatch their escape plan, it's really eye-opening to see the world from Jack's perspective. The whole thing is eye-opening from his perspective. And the movie does just such a good job of amplifying the claustrophobia of this small space. The way it was filmed really does fill in the picture that you get when you're reading this book, but even more so seeing it on screen. My only downside to the movie really is that, because it's the nature of the film, it can't really be told as much from Jack's perspective, which I think really, really adds to the book, because you have that sort of adult interpretation as you're reading, and you start to understand things that Jack doesn't quite get, but you can tell from your own perspective. And so you miss a little bit of that in the translation to film. But even so, like, the movie and the acting is just really excellent. Obviously, Oscar stuff.
Sounds excellent. I've not read the book and I've not seen the movie either. So you got me.
It also makes me cry, both of them. Just fair warning.
Ooh, another tearjerker. Oh boy. that sounds really, just interesting, good. I mean, especially, there's all those stories about similar stories happening in real life, which is heartbreaking, but so to see someone write, vividly about that, just very compelling. So yes, sounds good. So my next book to movie is one that's coming out in a new version very soon. In fact, this upcoming May. It's The Time Traveler's Wife by Audrey Niffenegger. And there was a movie that came out in 2009 with Rachel McAdams of The Notebook fame. So she's in that. And then the book actually came out in 2003. So it's an older book. But then this upcoming May, HBO is coming out with a mini series. So like 6 episodes covering the same book. So there's a new take on it coming out soon. And this is kind of been described as a mix of science fiction and romance. So it's about Henry and Claire, and Henry is a librarian, which is always cool. And he has what's called this genetic disorder that causes him to time travel periodically. And Claire is an artist. And the book shows Claire and Henry meeting in 1991, when Claire is 21 and he's 30. And to Henry, this is the first time they've met. But to Claire, she's known him her whole life. So it's kind of, that's where it starts to give you an idea. Like, he doesn't know exactly what all that she knows, because she's staying in one place throughout time, but he's moving constantly. So it kind of jumps in that way from their first meeting to various parts in their life, when they get married, have a family, and all of that. And it switches points of view between him and her as well. So it just kind of covers that. And I think it's kind of a unique take on a romance, a little more science fiction-y. And I'm also curious about, with this adaptation, movies are usually no more than an hour and a half to 2 hours, where sometimes television shows can get more in depth because they actually have more runtime when they cover all the episodes. So I'm kind of curious to see when this new adaptation comes out, if they'll be able to cover all the same things. But
absolutely. And I think that that's a very good point. And you and I both know this from loving some classic books, that sometimes the mini series just does the book so much more justice than a movie ever could.
Yeah, exactly. So,
so my next one is also sort of romancy. This one is The Hating Game by Sally Thorne, which you've heard me talk about before.
Oh, yes.
And I think that I've mentioned it on here before, but I don't believe I've given it a full dedication.
Tell us.
And so this is one of my favorite rom-coms in recent history. It came out as a book in 2016. The author is Australian. It takes place in Australia, but the movie, which just came out the end of 2021, is here in the US.
Okay.
It stars Lucy Hale as well. And so this is about Lucy and Joshua. Sorry, don't call him Josh. He doesn't like that. And they are complete opposites who work in the same role at a company. Both of them are the executive assistant to one of the CEOs of their publishing house. When the two houses merged together, their bosses became co-CEOs, and both of them still rose to being the executive assistants, but now they sort of have to share that position. And their bosses are pretty opposite and tend to pit them against each other already. But their merger forced Lucy and Joshua to be in the same working space, doing roughly the same role and being the go-between between their CEOs. And they hate each other. Their styles of business are so different. Their styles of life and organization and everything are just so different that they clash constantly. And they make a bit of a game about it when they play tricks on one another or criticize one another. And now there's a big promotion that has come up and both of them are going for it. And they've made a game out of this as well because it's kind of the ultimate game. Whoever loses has to quit.
Wow, high stakes.
Because whoever loses doesn't want to work for the other one anyway.
Oh, great. Yeah.
So they have these petty tricks that they play on one another constantly to undermine each other, so much so that the HR person is just really sick of them. And they annoy each other and nitpick and all that stuff. But the more they both put into their work to try to get this promotion, the more that they're spending a little more time together and getting to know one another. And maybe this rivalry is not exactly what it seems, but maybe something different. Maybe it's not hate after all, but something else.
Oh, perfection.
Yes. So this is one of those favorite tropes in a lot of romantic type books where it's, the hate to love kind of idea. Yes. And in this movie, I was a little worried about how they were going to play it out, but I was pleasantly surprised. I think the movie was pretty solid. It lost a little in the sort of side characters and background stuff, but you kind of always do in movies.
Right.
But at the same time, I think it did a good job establishing the relationships between the main characters and their character development and sort of showing how they grew over the course of the story. And it's just a really fun book that everyone should read anyway, but also has a fun movie afterwards.
Oh, how fun. And it's funny, we were just talking off camera about maybe the original ultimate hate to love story, Pride and Prejudice. And I mean, throughout ages, like whether it's book and, now even movie format, it's a great template. It just never gets old. It's always fun. And when writers do it good, it's really good. So
absolutely.
Well, thank you guys for joining us for this week's edition of All Booked Up with Cailey and Meg. We know these are coming out or have already come out as movies already, but we encourage you as librarians, of course, please read the book first and then judge the movie.
Absolutely. And I would be remiss if I did not mention the fact that the Mentor on the Lake branch does have a Watch What You Read book club that compares book and movie adaptations of that book. So if you're interested in that, check that out. Look at our calendar to see when our next meeting is. So enjoy these and others and happy reading.
And viewing.